The Power Factor Show with Rick, Steve, and Caleb. Episode 74.
You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Brought to you by Safariland and Hodgdon, the gunpowder people.
Welcome to the Power Factor Show. I'm Caleb.
I'm Steve.
I'm Rick.
And we're off to a rough start today. But on today's episode, we're going to be talking about shooting your carry gun in competition. But before we do that, you guys had a rules question that you had from last week.
So a couple weeks ago, we asked a kind of a rules question of everybody of, I believe the question was, if I go correctly with memory here, is that in USPSA, during the make ready command, we talked before about taking sight pictures, and if you take a loaded gun sight picture, which is okay, a lot of ROs would get antsy about that, but it is a legal thing to do. The question was, though, is if you stick your finger in the trigger guard on the trigger during a loaded gun sight picture, is it a DQ or is it not a DQ? So I'll ask you guys, what do you think the answer is?
I'll let you go first.
Yeah.
I'll admit that if I saw somebody do it, I probably wouldn't DQ them because I'm unaware of what the rule is.
I think that's a DQ. I'm going to go the opposite of Rick, and I think that is actually a DQ.
So you'd kick somebody out whether it's illegal or not?
Well, no, I would check the rules.
Oh, well,
I would
check the rules. Anybody can do that.
Yeah.
I would actually go and try to find it in the rule book if it says.
Well, I'd make the guy find it. I've got more important things to do. You go find that in the rule book. I got it, yeah.
So it's interesting that you guys are split on this because we had a certain amount of voting from the viewers, and they were pretty much split on it also. Pretty much right down the middle. It turns out, unfortunately, the way the rule book is written, that it would lead one to believe that it may potentially be a DQ.
Lead one to believe to potentially be a DQ.
Yeah.
Boy, that's really coming down on the side of
there's
which
a
side?
70% chance it's probably a DQ.
But it's not.
Oh.
It's not a DQ.
So here's I've made a copy of the 3 points here in terms of USPSA. This is under negligent gun handling. That cover finger in the trigger guard. Failure to keep the finger outside the trigger guard while clearing malfunction where the competitor clearly moves the gun away from aiming at targets. Failure to keep the finger outside the trigger guard during movement in accordance with section 8.5, which basically says, except when a competitor is actually aiming or shooting at targets, all movement, see appendix A3, must be accomplished with the fingers visibly outside the trigger guard, and with the safety should be engaged. The handgun must be pointed in the safe direction. Now, appendix 8.3 defines movement as taking more than one step in any direction or changing body position. Okay, now here's the big one. This is where everybody gets kind of messed up. Failure to keep the finger outside the trigger guard during loading, reloading, unloading. The exception is while complying with the make ready command to lower the hammer of a gun without a decocking lever, or while initially loading a revolver with a spurless hammer. Now, the thing is that you got to think about this in terms of, if I'm standing in a position on the range and I have my finger in the trigger guard, and I'm just pointing it down range, and I'm not shooting at targets, and I'm not moving, and I'm not basically doing anything, but I'm just standing there.
Right.
That's not a DQ.
Right.
So what's the difference between that
and standing in the box?
And standing there in the box during the make ready, taking a loaded gun sight picture with your finger in the trigger guard, pointing at a target? No difference. I mean, there literally is no difference. The only, the difference is you're during the make ready as opposed to during the course of fire. The problem is that they put this exception in here, which basically says the exception is while complying with the make ready command to lower the hammer of a gun without a decocking lever. In my mind, there's no point of putting the exception there, because if it's not a DQ, there's no point of putting the exception. The exception makes it sound like it is a DQ, but in this case, these guys will let you do it.
Right.
So from what I heard is that they put the exception in to prevent overzealous ROs from DQing people who were basically doing that.
We actually had that happen at a club match where a guy was shooting a CZ75, and he went, pinch the hammer, lower the hammer, just like the Tanfoglio I've got over there, and the RO was brand new, just passed his cert, and was like, "Stop! You can't do that." And the guy goes, "I can't
how else am I going to lower
he's like, "So you want me to shoot limited minor because I've got to lower the hammer somehow?" So that's very interesting. I never actually. It's funny when you go from IDPA rules to USPSA rules, where in USPSA it's very much if it's not written specifically in the rule book, you can do it.
Yep.
In IDPA, where if it's not written in the rule book, you still probably can't do it, but you got to find out first.
Right.
So, and I kid IDPA, but there's very much USPSA. The rule book very much is the letter of the law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, there's your answer. The answer is it's not a DQ.
Although you might still get DQ'd for doing it.
Yeah, you might have to actually go to the rule book.
Yeah, and you can point out the point that I made before. There's no difference between standing there with your finger in the trigger guard, not doing anything, looking at targets, versus standing there and then make ready doing the same thing.
Just tell them the Power Factor show said it was okay.
Right.
Yeah. Keep a copy of this video in your pocket.
The funny thing is the definition of loading, because what they define as loading is when you insert the magazine in the gun, you're loading, but now it's loaded. Okay, so you're no longer loading anymore; it's loaded. And then when you chamber around, you're loading, but then once it's chamber, it's loaded, and it's silly in my mind.
I should put my finger in the trigger guard while going like this with my mag.
If you could somehow put your finger in the trigger guard while inserting the magazine, then it would be a DQ. At any rate.
Probably still there's no real reason to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
just make a point of not doing it, because like you said, there's no point of doing it. But if you did do it, it's not a DQ.
Well, it's worth noting that IPSC actually doesn't even allow dry firing now. Before in the
IPSC.
Right, IPSC, not USPSA, but IPSC does not allow an unloaded sight picture / dry fire during the make ready command anymore. Yeah, so which is interesting, that in USPSA, because the side tangent to all of this is I saw a thread on the Enos forum about people who take forever to load and make ready, and how it's terrible or how it's not a big deal depending on which side of the fence you come down on that, and the unloaded / loaded sight picture was definitely part of that discussion.
Right, yeah. So one thing I wanted to say here also, real quick, is I want to thank some of the viewers for their comments about some of the shotgun episodes that we've been doing here. We've been actually getting a lot of positive feedback on that. So evidently there are more than 3 people who are really interested in it. But in light of that, and I think Caleb knows where I'm going with this.
Yes, I do.
So I want to officially announce the Power Factor Show Shotgun Team Challenge that we're going to have here.
I've only heard about it before tonight.
So what we're going to do, the way this is going to work, is that John is going to lead one team. Okay. I am going to lead the other team. We'll flip a coin and see which team you guys fall on.
Okay.
And the challenge will be that we'll shoot a round of trap and a round of skeet, and we're going to turn this into an episode and do it on film. And whichever team has the highest score will get the coveted Power Factor Show Golden Clay Pigeon Award that you can see what we're putting on your fireplace mantle. So,
I'm down with that.
Whenever you guys are ready, you can shoot whatever gun you want. Don't care, but you can only put, it's only 1 round per target. So you were saying you wanted to go with your Sega, so
just one round ball, just a 1 round mag. This is so tragic.
Like blam 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 blam.
No follow up shots.
No.
That's gonna be so weird.
We can only load one, or we can only shoot one.
You can only shoot one.
Okay.
It's one round per bird. So on trap, it's you fire once, and if you miss, you miss.
Right.
On skeet, there are doubles where you have 2 rounds in the gun, and you shoot one at one and one at the other. So.
Okay. So we the next time there's a sunny day, or what's the?
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll
I'm down. I'm down.
Yeah. So you'll be seeing that coming in the future, and no betting allowed.
Totally betting allowed. It's Caleb at gunrightsmedia.com. I'll act as the clearinghouse for that, unless you work for the FBI, in which case I won't. Yeah. So that's good. That's going to be a lot of fun. To the actual topic of this episode, one of the things that comes up a lot in the shooting sports is people say I can't shoot my carry gun in Sport X because of reason XYZ, or I don't want to shoot my carry gear because I'd be at a huge disadvantage shooting my carry gear. And there's some merit to that, I think, and at the same time, there's not. It really depends on how you approach the situation.
Definitely.
So I think, when you look at it, you've got 3 different aspects. You have, am I at a disadvantage shooting my carry gear? And that depends on what your goal is. And you have, can I shoot my carry gear at all? Which is, again, depends. And then the last one, which is, is which is better to shoot your carry gear in? Should you shoot it in USPSA or IDPA?
Right.
So, to the first question, I think, let's look at are you at a disadvantage shooting your carry gear?
Depends on the sport in which your carry gear is.
It really depends on what your, like Rick said, what your carry gear is. If you have a really small micro bug type gun or whatever, yeah, I would probably say, so that's the...
This is the M&P Shield.
Right.
And I have XS big dot sights on it, and even with its most capacious magazine, I can get 8+1 in there.
Right.
So I would be shooting
in production, you're already going to be in a disadvantage from a magazine capacity standpoint. Yeah, right.
But if you've got courses of fire in USPSA, they're 8-round friendly because of single stack.
Right.
It shouldn't be that much of a disadvantage. You'll be at a disadvantage compared to other people with 10, but not that much. It's not like you're going to have 12-round arrays where you're constantly reloading in the middle of them.
Mm-hmm. But the other thing I think you really need to identify here is kind of like what you alluded to is who are you competing against and what are you trying to accomplish? Yes, in terms of production, everybody else, yes, you will be at a disadvantage. But you didn't come out to the match with that gun with the intent that you were going to win production. Right. I mean, you came out there with a plan of going out there and improving your gun handling skills with that particular gun. And it's a different agenda, I think. You want to look at it from that standpoint. Now, in terms of, let's say, a little bit more competition, I shouldn't say competition, but a carry gun that would lend itself more to competition, Glock 17, really popular in production and a lot of people carry them. I mentioned before that I shoot a Glock 19, or I have shot a Glock 19 in production. That's what I use for carry. There's a slight disadvantage to that just from the standpoint of the size of the gun, length of the slide, and so on and so forth. But in reality, I don't think that gun is really that much of a disadvantage compared to the 17s or the 34s that are out there.
I was talking to a GM about it, and he said that, and this is one of the top GMs, and he said that for him, going from a 5-inch slide like you get on a 34 to a 4.5-inch slide like you get on a 17, he would probably be giving up 3% in terms of points.
Right.
But we're not that guy.
No.
For the average shooter going out there with the 19 that you carry, or the M&P compact that you carry, you're not going to be at a tremendous disadvantage because most of the other shooters at the match, if your goal is to win the match, then most of the other shooters at the match aren't going to be so much better than you that a 19 is going to be that big of a handicap.
The other thing is, if your goal is to win the match, you're not going to come out there
with your carry gear, right?
Carry gear. So, I think you have to first dismiss that as an initial data point. Is that if your goal is to win the match, you're not going to come out with your carry gear to
Absolutely.
win it.
Well, a friend of mine said that if you want to shoot, and I'll use USPSA as an example. So to dovetail a little bit, I've been using this appendix carry holster, which is illegal in IDPA because it's forward of the hip.
Right.
I could shoot this in USPSA in limited or open division, depending on how my gun was set up. And we were talking about this, and he said, look, if you're going to shoot your carry gear in USPSA specifically, there's you're not under any obligation to shoot the match to win the match. Shoot it as tactically as you want, And the thing is, if you're going to do that, go into that match with the mindset that I don't care about my score.
Right. And you have to go into that mindset.
Because if you go in there and you start caring about your score, then the next thing you're going to do, you're going to have a Tanfoglio production gun and dropped in offset holsters, and you're going to have gotten away from what you wanted to do. So if you're going to shoot your carry gear, you can't think about your score. Don't worry about winning because you won't.
Right. It's also interesting that the very first episode of this program that we did, you and I kind of talked about how we got into IPSC, why we got into IPSC shooting. And from my standpoint, I got into IPSC shooting not from the competition, but I was using it as basically a vehicle to improve my gun handling skills. So I was shooting an inside the waistband holster, a rather really crappy one, and a 1911 and mag stuff in my back pocket. And I wasn't looking to win anything. I was just out there looking to improve my gun handling skills. And I think for a lot of people, in fact, in our IPSC 101 classes, we've had a lot of people who came into it with the same approach. I'm just kind of using this as a means for improving my shooting and getting more shooting time and stuff like that.
Yeah, my first couple of years, I was shooting a single stack with 8-round mags in limited. And I certainly wasn't going to win anything there, even within class. I wasn't going to be very competitive.
That's what I was using, as 8-round mags in limited. Back then, that's all there was.
Back before single stack, before L10.
We're talking early 90s, so
Yeah.
I think one of the things that people come around to a lot of the time is, and you see this if you go on, the IDPA forum or any of the more self-defense oriented forums, is they'll say, I want to get into IDPA shooting. I have a Glock 19 for carry. What gun should I buy? And the smart answers will be like, well, just go shoot your Glock 19, you dumbass.
Right. But what if he says, I've got a Glock 26 for carry?
Go shoot that. You know, I mean, what? 26 holds what? 10 rounds?
If you use like the longest mag. Right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if.
Look.
I don't know. I don't think I'm aware of a single person shooting a real carry gun in USPSA ever locally. I mean, like a Glock 26 or something like this,
or something like the Shield.
Yeah, I'm not saying they don't. I'm not. There's plenty of guys who carry. Apparently, there's lots of guys who carry 44-ounce 1911s with light rails and stuff on them. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know anybody that comes to the match with a Glock 26 or a Colt Defender or
or an M&P Shield.
I've seen people with Colt Defenders and really small stuff before.
I saw a guy shoot an IDPA match with a one of those Colts that had the gutter sight.
New Agent.
The Agent. Yeah. She could not hit diddly past 7 yards, but God bless her heart for coming out to it. Yeah. I think you get into that situation. Speaking of the Glock 26, and it's a perfectly legitimate gun because Scarlett Johansson is rocking one in the Avengers movie.
That's a really good movie.
I haven't seen it yet. Don't say anything. Okay. But she's rocking it in a drop leg holster.
Yeah, no, it's a good movie.
All right.
Yeah.
I think her leg's long enough to accommodate
it's
a 34.
It's also interesting that the company that I work for has a product that shows up in that movie.
Oh, well.
Wow.
And it's not the Acura NSX. Oops.
Okay.
But kind of the next aspect of that is, yes, you'll be at a disadvantage if you care about the scores, probably. But you shouldn't care about the scores, so that objection is dismissed. We're moving on. The next is, not just can you, but, can you as in is it a good idea, but can you under the rules? Mm-hmm. So, for example, we'll start with, I've got, I've got a couple guns here, three actually.
When you say under the rules, you mean, are we talking IPSC or USPSA?
We're actually going to do both.
Yeah.
So, for example, the M&P Shield that I have right now, you can shoot this in IDPA or USPSA. However, because it's not on the approved production gun list, you would be shooting this in limited or limited 10 and scoring minor with 8-round mags. Again, since you don't care about your score, that's not that big a deal. And in IDPA, there's been no ruling whether it's SSP legal. I would assume it's SSP legal because it meets all the requirements for an SSP gun, but you can legally shoot this in IDPA. Again,
it's more or less a derivative, right, of an
MP.
So.
The trigger's actually different. Interesting side note is the trigger group. The trigger group that they put in this is different from the ones in the first-gen MMPs. It actually has a much more distinct reset point, and some of the other complaints that people raised about the M&P were addressed with this trigger. According to the guys that I talked to at Smith, this trigger with its actual reset point, which you can probably hear, will actually be making its way into the full-sized M&Ps later on. Good. They said either late 2012 or early 2013 for that. So this, you can shoot IDPA or USPSA. Now our next carry gun, well, Rick, can you shoot this in IDPA?
No.
Yeah, no, not at all. One of the current hotness is in...
Shoot it in USPSA.
Absolutely. One of the current hotness in...
Division for everything in USPSA.
For tactical guns is to put a red dot sight on the rear of the slide. Now you see these with just an RDS like on my gun. This is a Lone Wolf Timberwolf frame with a slide from Brownells, a Glock 34 barrel, which is eventually going to get threaded and some other silly things, and a Trijicon RMR. You'll see some of these with suppressor sights that are mounted forward or aft of the RDS, and then a tall front sight so you can still track your front sight. Yeah. You'll see some set up just like this where it's a slick gun. Obviously, this is illegal in IDPA, and IDPA has no intentions of making this setup legal for the sport at the time. USPSA, you could shoot this in open. You can shoot it in open. I carry this in an appendix holster, so I could take my carry gear, this gun, with 17-round mags, and...
Bob May is your friend right now, by the way.
Appendix with an RDS, I know. I could take this gun with an appendix holster and my RDS and my 17-round mags and be perfectly legal in open division, and I would get wrecked by guys shooting 30-round STIs.
Right.
And
you wouldn't stand a chance compared to them.
No. And then the last gun that I have...
again, that's not the intent. You're out there with your carry gun, out there having fun. You just happen to be in the same division as some other guys.
The last thing we have is not a carry gun, and this is sort of to examine the difference between a production legal gun, which is originally set up as the division for your carry gear.
Right.
So here's a gun that's production legal. This is a Tanfoglio Witness Elite Stock 2. This weighs 44 ounces with an empty magazine inserted and holds 17 rounds of .38 Super. This is legal for production. This is a production gun. It's got the Bomar style sights. It has, in single action mode, a 3-pound trigger and
a little bit creepy 3-pound trigger.
A little bit creepy, yeah. But that's a completely unmodified trigger. So this is truly factory. I like the double action trigger. Our producer has been ruined by open guns and doesn't like it. But when you compare that to a gun that's an open gun, it's just, for me, I was looking at these guns earlier today, and it just struck me. I'm like, so my carry gun isn't legal for production division, and there's no way in hell I would carry my production gun.
Right.
Yeah. So the answer to the question of can you shoot it is maybe. And it really just depends. If you look hard enough in USPSA, the answer is yes.
There's a division for everything in USPSA.
Absolutely.
I mean, even, everything goes into open at some point, or can go into open at some point if it has to. So you can, but again, you're not going to be competitive. But like we were saying, if you are shooting production and you were using your Glock 26, you're not competitive there. But you're in a division that fits the gun.
We keep saying you're not going to be competitive, but how much of a hit do you get if you're shooting your carry gun in competition? I mean, is it going to be 5%?
It's hard to say. I mean,
actually,
what?
It's pretty easy to say. I shot. That might not have been a smooth segue, but it was a segue.
Wham!
I shot the 2010 or 2011 Washington State IDPA Championship in CDP division with a 5-inch 8-round 45. A month later, I shot the Idaho State match with my carry gun, which is a 3.5-inch 45. Loaded with Daytonics loaded with 7-round mags. So I'm at a.
Do you have spacers on there?
Yeah, those are over travel stops, so the mags don't bounce off the ejector.
That makes sense.
So anyway, I not only had my own scores to compare from one match to the next, but the same guy that finished first expert. At the Washington match, also shot the Idaho match, so I could compare myself.
Like the relative.
How did I do against him? So at the Washington match, he beat me by 5 seconds. He was first expert, I was second expert. In Idaho, with him still shooting the 5-inch gun and me shooting the compact, he beat me by a minute.
Wow, that's Now, do you think it was?
But are you sure that it was a fair comparison? Because so
it's not exactly the same match. It's not exactly the same match.
Yeah, it's not the same match.
Right.
If you have any problems, maybe he shot a better match the second one versus the first one.
Well,
could be, but still, in an IDPA match, if you're losing by somebody by a second or more per stage over the course of the day,
that's
a pretty significant ass kicking. So, but then to lose to the same guy by 6 or 8 seconds per stage. I think it was. I mean, I've shot that compact gun at 3 sanctioned matches, a number of local matches.
So how many rounds did these hold?
7. And so
normally you could hold what?
8 plus 1. Yeah. So essentially,
giving up a bullet is a big deal.
What it did for me in my regular match performance was
I think that's a lot of it right there.
I went from essentially competing for top expert to competing for middle of sharpshooter by changing guns.
Yeah.
I think for me the biggest thing about, and I've done a lot of shooting with the Shield compared to regular Glocks and stuff like that. For me, the biggest thing about shooting this gun quickly is mag changes. So I can actually run this gun in terms of splits on up close targets about as fast as I can run a 34.
Right.
The side cycles very aggressively. And a bunch of other fun things. But when I go to do a mag change, all of a sudden I'm trying to hit this really tiny target, and I've actually got to break my hand off the gun because I don't want to end up with a blood blister the size of Texas.
Right.
Now I was messing around with it, and the mag wouldn't drop out when I hit the button because I've got 2 fingers in contact with the mag,
and you're not,
so I have to essentially hold the gun like this to get the mag out and to get the reload mag in.
When you're shooting a small gun, you have to be very classy and extend your pinky finger to make sure the gun functions properly.
So the reason I said it, or I was saying at least, that it was kind of a difficult question to answer is that I have shot in production with my Glock 19. I have not shot with a Glock 34, so I don't have anything to directly compare it to of saying, an apples to apples comparison. I don't feel like I gave up a lot with my Glock 19. The only baseline that I can refer back to is what we mentioned before, is that Glock Slowly match that we shot. And in that one I finished, if you take the one guy who was actually shooting an open gun out of the final results, I finished 4th overall in that. And the guys who finished 1, 2, and 3 were all Grandmasters. And they were all shooting either 17s or 34s, and I had an 80% score of the guy who won the match. So,
and that's right in line with where you would normally score relative to a GM.
Right. Now the other thing with the Glock 19 is that I have 15 round, and this is what you were just pointing out. I have 15 round magazines. They have 17 round magazines, and a lot of the targets, and it was a Glock Slowly match. It was an outlaw match, so to speak. A lot of the targets were set up in like 8s and 8s. You have 8 targets here, 8 rounds here, 8 rounds there.
That's kind of a big advantage.
I was like sitting trying to go, where am I going to split my reload at? And so that I felt actually what hindered me most in that match was my magazine capacity and not the gun.
Anytime you're giving up bullets to someone else in your division, I shot limited recently with a 12-round gun, and there were I was fine on like a 24-round stage or something like that, because there's a reload in there for everybody. But those 16-round stages, I'm like, oh god, I gotta find a place to reload here. And the same goes, if you're shooting your carry guns. An 8-round mag, I'm giving up 2 rounds to everybody in production. And even though a lot of times you'll see that 8 and 8 relay, I've seen enough stages where you'll have a 4 and a 6 array where I'm going to be doing a reload in the middle of those, and a 10-round gun isn't. Right.
And just, to drive that point home, when we shot the Nationals a couple years ago, there was one of the guys who was shooting limited in our squad who had a 21-round magazine. So he had 22 in the gun, and there was an array. How we broke it up, it was 20 rounds. He didn't have to do a reload.
Right.
My magazines hold either 19 or 20. I did have to do it, and that just extra reload, there's a second and a half that I can't get back. He's already a second and a half ahead of me in terms of.
But does he shoot the stage differently, knowing that his advantage is he's not going to do a reload? Whereas you have the expectation that you're going to do a reload. You have extra rounds wherever you need them. He's constantly shooting with this idea that I can't fire more than an extra shot or 2, or I'm going to have to do a reload.
I don't have extra rounds where I need or don't need them from the standpoint. I'm literally looking at an array of targets and going, I've got 20 rounds in my gun. I'm going to shoot 20 rounds right here and I'm not making any safety rounds or extra rounds or whatever. I'm literally going to fire 20 rounds here, and I've got no room for error. And then I'm going to do reload, and then I got these targets over here.
Right.
And then I got to do another reload. And what it turned out is that I had to do 2 reloads versus his 1 reload.
Yeah. And that's a big difference. Yeah. Especially with limited, a lot of times guys will not be able to The nice thing about going from production to limited is you get really used to picking the best place in the stage to do a reload. And there's a lot more stage planning in that.
Yeah.
But back to the concept of is it legal to shoot your gun in IDPA or USPSA? With the exception of optic guns, the answer is yes across the board.
Ports,
right? If you carry like one of those ported, ultra compact whatevers, so if your gun's ported or it has a dot on it, IDPA is a no-go.
Right.
But USPSA loves you and your money and wants you to come shoot.
In open.
So in open, yes.
So with your 3-inch iron-sighted 45
Springfield
with 7-round mags. Right to open.
Or your Glock 19C. I actually saw I saw a guy running one of those in open with an RDS, and he was actually pretty good. He was very familiar with his gun, but that's just more than I'd like to do.
I think the other thing it'd be worthwhile to talk about is that the one comment I've heard by people, I should say, against shooting, we'll call it USPSA or IPSC or whatever, is 2 things. First off, the belief that it's a race gun competition, and that there's no way that they can go and shoot their carry gun. It's not true. You can go and shoot production with your carry gun equipment.
Or single stack.
Or single stack, or whatever, right.
Yeah, whatever division.
You can go shoot any of these divisions or whatever division with your carry gun, and it will find a place somewhere in USPSA. Even this, like you were saying, this is your carry gun. You can go shoot this in open division if you wish. But the other thing that I always see is that they'll say, well, the reason that you can, that I want to shoot on EPAs in IPSC or USPSA is that you're not using cover. You're not doing things in tactical sequence, or you're not doing things like magazine retention. There's nothing in IPSC that says that you cannot use cover.
Yeah.
You cannot shoot targets in tactical sequence.
Knock yourself out.
And you can keep your magazines. I mean, you can shoot it any way you want. Now, it might be worthwhile telling the RO, in advance, this is what I'm
going to slice the pie.
The only reason I'm saying that is because they're then going to think that you're a new shooter, and they're going to go, you don't need to actually use cover or shoot things in tactical sequence, and you can drop your magazines all over. I mean, they're going to tell you that if you do it. And obviously the point is that you're there with a goal, and the goal is not to win the match, but the goal is to improve your shooting technique. So for those of you who, if you have a IPSC club or whatever that's around you, don't say, well, I'm not going to go shoot that because it, doesn't suit the type of shooting I want to do. You can go shoot it your own way. You don't have to go and shoot at IPSC high speed, your hair on fire at 90 miles or Mach 3 or whatever.
But that's more fun.
Yeah, well, yeah, but anyway, you'll get there someday.
Well, and I think, and that segues nicely into kind of the last portion of this, which is, should I? Because, and you hear, so what's funny is you hear a lot of like tactical guys, who don't shoot competition at all say shooting competition will teach you bad habits that will get you killed. Then you hear, which is bullcrap. Then you hear a lot of IDPA guys say shooting USPSA will teach you bad habits that will get you killed. And
then you see a lot of guys who never leave their keyboard.
Right.
Sitting there going, those guys that play those shooting sports are going to get killed.
It's so true. But, and the thing with all of that is, I think personally that if you want to get that, if you're going to shoot gun games to learn tactics, you're already on the wrong track, regardless of IDPA or USPSA. I personally would recommend that if you want to shoot a sport that, in my opinion, will benefit you the most for defensive use of a firearm, you should shoot USPSA. And I know Rick disagrees with me on this because we already talked about this on email.
I'd love to hear your reasoning about those.
Well, and my thought is, and this is actually a conversation I've had in the past with a lot of other guys, and I've been on both sides of it, and I'm currently on this side, and in 6 months I may be back to the other side. Yeah. But the thing that I like about USPSA for self-defense is that USPSA rewards you for two things. It rewards you for improvisational thinking, and it rewards you for violence of action. And violence of action, in my opinion, if someone's trying to kill me, I want to out-violence them faster than they can violence me.
Right.
And as far as the improvisational thinking goes, USPSA gives you a course of fire. It says here's 20 targets, some of them are steel, some of them are paper. Solve this situation as best you see fit within the rules.
Right.
And that's all they do. Now, counter argument, and I like that because it means that you create your plan, you solve the problem. No one's telling you how to do it. The counter argument to that is that you have all this time in prep to do that, which, well, okay, you don't have to. No one is telling you.
You can go to a black hole, so to speak.
No one is telling you. No one forces you to do a walkthrough. So if you're serious about solving the problem improvisationally, walk through the stage one time so you know where the targets are, so you'll be safe. You don't want to be running around waving a gun. But there's no need to create a detailed stage plan. You go in, shoot it like you would shoot it in a defensive situation. I've seen guys do that. They're going to go to slide lock in the middle of an array, and they'll do an emergency reload and get back to shooting.
I think those guys mostly just aren't keeping track of their rounds.
And that's the other thing about improvisational thinking is how many times have you gone into an array of steel targets being like, I'm going to go 1 for 1 on these bitches, and then I'm going to do a reload right after it, and then you're like, miss, and you've got to fix your plan.
I always give myself a couple insurance shots on steel no matter what. It's just a given. I'm not at the confidence level where I know I'm going to go 1 for 1.
Okay, so my take on the self-defense competition thing is that although I've shot a lot of USPSA in terms of number of matches, many more USPSA matches than IDPA matches, I find that this idea that I'm going to use my creativity that I am developing by shooting USPSA is somehow going to translate into self-defense, to my mind, doesn't make any sense. All of your planning and all of your strategizing is done off the clock at your leisure, and so when the timer goes off, you're just executing the plan you've already made.
But you don't think in IDP the guys don't do the same thing? I mean, they seem to stay.
Yeah. But
they know what they're doing.
People complain that IDPA is, I've got this script that I have to follow.
Right.
But my point is that a truly defensive situation is forced on you. You don't have a choice about where people are going to approach from. It's dictated to you by by your opponents to a large extent. How many of them are there? Where are they located and whatnot? You can't choose where they are. You can't choose which one to shoot first. If there's a guy in front of you and a guy behind you, you know.
I was going to say, can you go off the script in IDPA and
No.
go, you know what, I'm not going to shoot this one first. I'm going to change my own plan.
Well, you can.
You'll violate a bunch of rules because it says you have to. The guy who's closest is the assumed threat. Mm-hmm. The procedure says this guy pulls a knife on you, and then after you shoot him, the guy behind you comes up, and becomes a threat. Well, you can't shoot the guy behind you first because he hasn't appeared on the scene until after you take care of the first one.
And the reason I was asking that is that, let's say you have an IPSC course of fire that has just a bunch of targets out there, and you decide in your mind that you come up with this weird scenario. And unfortunately, your start position here, but your funny weird scenario is that it's, that
you run down there and then start shooting.
Yeah. So you run down at the end of the course of fire, and you're pretending you're in your house retreating now.
And then back up and shoot them all?
Back up and shoot
them. Oh, yeah.
You can absolutely do that,
That's my point. In IPSC, you can create whatever scenario you want based on the targets. You can sit there and go look at all this stuff and go, you know what?
But
all of a sudden it's...
Again, it's pretty fanciful to believe that anybody's going to do that. I've been shooting IPSC for 15 years, and I've never seen anybody do that. And that's not to say you can't, but I'm just, if you're interested in shooting IPSC, you're probably not interested in ducking behind cover and shooting in tactical sequence. And that's not to say you can't, but and there's a lot of people who their shooting sports are chosen for them by geographics.
Oh yeah,
they've got 3 USPSA clubs within an hour, and the nearest IDPA clubs in the next state. And so in that sense, you might just be stuck shooting IPSC in tac sequence. I mean, that might be your only choice. And so go for it. But I'm just in my mind, I see that there are. In our area, we've got very active USPSA competition, very active IDPA competition, and very little crossover. I mean, there's very few guys that shoot both sports.
That's actually true, yeah.
And so one, I think, appeals to one kind of person, and I shoot both, and I've been shooting both for over 10 years. But I think in general, most people, they're attracted to one or the other, and they have their own reasons for doing so. I did.
I got it. I think, and to completely just steer around that crash course, what you see a lot is people will get into IDPA because they've gotten a carry permit. They bought a gun for concealed carry, and IDPA says defensive right there in the name. And so they go there and they learn good gun handling skills. And for, personality type 1, that's what they wanted. They wanted to learn how to handle their carry gun better, and they're very happy. My journey was I shot IDPA, and I'm like, hey, this going fast stuff is kind of cool.
Right.
I wonder what else I can do.
Right.
And because of that, I ended up shooting USPSA because, if I did, I tell people all the time, if I didn't shoot IDPA and USPSA, I'd race cars. I would find somewhere else in my life to go fast.
Yeah.
And so some people will be perfectly happy with IDPA.
Is that a Ricky Bobby syndrome? I want to go fast.
Yes, damn it! I just want to go fast. I don't care if it's an open gun or a drag car. I will go fast. By the way, there's a really cool road up north of Arlington that's got a nice 30 degree right-hander that turns into a aggressive S-turn to the left.
9?
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember because I ended up going backwards on it in the wrong direction, but it's fun anyway. So.
Going fast backwards?
That's actually terrifying.
Yeah.
That's like when you're on a USPSA stage and you trip. And there's that moment where you're like, oh no, don't get DQ'd. Logue. So yeah, I think...
Actually, to divert that, but many years ago, I set the style points where I was falling, and because my feet slipped out from me, and as I was going...
Kept your muzzle down range?
No, I shot as I went down.
Nice!
And I was like, blam, 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 yeah.
Well done, sir.
Yeah, my feet went, and it was before the days of cleats.
I think for me, the bottom line is if you want to shoot your carry guns
in Dave Breesy days, for what it's worth.
In IDPA or USPSA, do it. You're not going to learn tactics. Don't expect to learn tactics from either sport. Go there with the mindset that I want to become better at gun handling, because if you want to learn tactics, there's plenty of schools to teach that. But what you will learn if you have a good foundation is safe gun handling and how to do things to your gun under simulated stress. The first time you have a stage 2 malfunction at a USPSA match, you'll...
Well, the thing that I noticed, I've been shooting 1911 since I was about 12 years old. Got to my first USPSA match, and half the stages I didn't disengage the grip safety. It had literally never happened to me in 15 years of shooting in 1911, but every other stage it happened to me at my first USPSA match. It's just one of those things that until you get in this situation where you're doing everything under time pressure and everything is kind of on the edge of being either just right or completely screwed up, you'll find all sorts of things don't go the way they do when you're standing at your indoor range with the temperature perfectly controlled and
I think the major takeaway from this is that don't be afraid to go out there with your carry gun and go shoot matches. In fact, for an entire year I shot my Glock 19 and I did it primarily from the standpoint as I wanted to become more familiar with what I use as a firearm to protect my life with. And my problem was that whenever I go out to the range, I'd always be grabbing my STI because I was practicing for a competition or whatever, and I'm not shooting my carry gun ever. It's just not getting pulled out of the safe to go shoot. It's pulled out of the safe to carry, but not being shot. So what's the point of that? So I went and took a class at Firearms Academy of Seattle with it, and then I started shooting the whole entire year with it for 12 months basically, and it was a great learning experience. I think I learned a lot about trigger control in the Glock 19 after I was all done with it.
I bet.
And some of their idiosyncrasies. But the other thing is that, be it IDPA or USPSA, shoot your carry gun, and if you are doing that, and let's say you are shooting USPSA, you can shoot it however you want. You got to realize up front you're not going to be there to win anything, but that's not the goal while you're doing this. You got to keep that in mind. If you are there to win something, you've got the wrong tool for the job.
If you shoot a USPSA match with a J-frame reloading from your pocket, by the way, we will send you some kind of award for awesomeness, because that's actually just masochistic. But
well, now the other thing is too is that
Golden Clay Pigeon Award.
There are apparently lots of people who carry a 44-ounce 1911 with a light rail on it. Based on my discussions with people,
this is a carry gun.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you're one of those people that's got the 44-ounce 1911 with the magwell and the light rail on it, just head out to the match.
Yeah, you're ready to go.
You don't have to be concerned with you don't have enough rounds or the barrel's too short.
You've got a Springfield TRP operator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One thing I would recommend before we wrap up is, before you go out, if you've never done any kind of competition shooting before, try to find at least a basic class that will teach you how to draw from the holster. I've seen guys who will to do a demonstration, they'll draw from the holster and they'll Charlie's Angels up here, and then we had one guy at a match go Charlie's Angels, pow, right into the baffles at the indoor range, so he got to go home. But yeah, so take, just a very basic, this is how you get the gun out of the holster, that kind of class, and then go out. A lot
does.
And I know most of the guys up here, they have a newbie's introduction sort of thing.
IDPA some kind does. The USPSA is not as formal, so to speak.
I think they're like a safety check or something.
There is a safety check, but it's not really training or anything of that nature. It's really just to verify that you are safe.
Evaluation.
Okay. Really, teach you
something. Something's better than nothing on that. All right, guys. Any last thoughts? Steve?
Nope.
Rick? Nope. Go shoot your carry guns, guys. It's totally awesome.
Yeah, do that. It's a lot of fun, too. You learn a lot. So, let's see. If you have any questions or comments, powerfactorshow@gmail.com.
Or the website, Power Factor Show.
No, you should have done it and made him do the Facebook.
I don't know Facebook.
Facebook.com.
I just remember there's a backslash in there somewhere.
Facebook.com/Power Factor Show.
It's actually a /
Okay.
/Power Factor Show. Yeah. And if you'd like to support the show, please send a donation. It's on the website at powerfactorshow.com.
Contrary to what Steve said, it's not down here, it's up here.
It's up here, yeah. It's actually up in the top sidebar. So, please continue to support the show. It helps, we use it to buy $1,400 Italian race production guns. Thanks, guys.
Our new Perazzi shotguns.